Everyone likes dirt on rock and roll on the rock and roll business. And my next guest knows it all. He tells all about it in his book, Sweetie, Baby, Cookie, Honey, which sounds like the beginning of a call from my agent. Please welcome Mr. Freddie Gershon. Yes. Now let's talk first about the title. Sweetie, Baby, Cookie, Honey.
Do you think you could give me a better reading of that? It's Sweetie, Baby, Cookie, Honey.
Okay, let me try it again. Sweetie, Baby, Cookie, Honey.
You got it. Well, it's everything it implies. It's the phony baloney world of rock and roll. It's the crapola. It's the jive talk. It's all of the insincerity. It's all the things they don't tell you about when you say, I want to be a rock star. I want to make it in showbiz. It's all of the awful underhanded things and the exploitation and the hurtful, painful aspects of the business that no one warns you about.
Now, does this come from your personal experiences?
I lived this book. I was a rock and roll lawyer. I started practicing law just when the Beatles came on the Ed Sullivan Show in the States in '64. I lived through that whole experience. I represented people like Van Morrison, Chicago, Bette Midler, Peter Allen, Neil Sedaka. I lived through all of that, and I got to see all of the other stars. I lived through the making of the movie Tommy with Tina Turner and the Acid Queen, and I ended up making movies and getting involved and cross-pollinating music into film with Saturday Night Fever and Grease. And so everything in this book, although it's fiction, I'm telling you, the names are changed to protect the guilty as well as the innocent. Right, you bet, you bet.
So, okay, like say, for instance, something like payola. Does that exist?
There's payola, drugola, girlola, recordola. Anything that can use as an incentive to get a record played on the radio is one of the olas. And recordola is the most interesting of all because in the early 50s, there was a bust of a guy named Alan Freed, who was the father of rock and roll. He was the early disc jockey who began playing that.
Now, wait, did Dick Clark get in trouble in Philly, too?
That's absolutely true.
Yes,
sir. It's rare with the trivia. Dick Clark was testified in Congress. But you see, there were no rules at the time. He owned an interest in publishing companies, music publishing companies, of songs that he was then playing as a disc jockey on the air. And so that was a conflict of interest. However, he did not go to jail. He was not convicted of anything. But everyone got in trouble at that time. And then the rules began to be made as we were going along. And the rules have changed, and it's become a little more civilized today, and it's a better controlled industry. But at the time, in the 50s and 60s, it was crazy and zany. And recordola was very easy. Instead of giving cash or drugs or girls to get a record played, you pull into a small town. You bring in a load of records. You say to the disc jockey, hey, man, here's a present for you, 200 records. It's a freebie. The guy takes those records, goes over to the local record store, says to the guy who owns the record store, I want $1 a record. The guy says, okay, here's $200. What's the name of the group? It's the Sweetie Babies, whatever the group is, okay? They mean nothing. The disc jockey goes back to his radio station, gets on the air and says, okay, kids, here's the newest, hottest group from blah, blah, blah record. It's the Sweetie Babies. I want you to go to your local record store and play that. And suddenly, it creates momentum. The record guy, the store owner, sells them for $2 a piece. The disc jockey got $1 a piece. No money passed hands between the record company and the radio station, and that was recordola.
Now, let me ask you about something that I read in the book that's probably very controversial, but you'll probably want to maybe touch on it. You mentioned that a lot of rock stars are worth more dead than alive. Now, I assume you mean that there's some fishy business going on with the deaths of some rock stars.
Well, if you isolate the deaths of Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, Elvis Presley, and you think of what these people were, you think of where their careers were when they died. These were 4 people who were out of control. They had drinking problems or drug problems or life problems. They were no longer going up. They were on that kind of a slope. They self-destructed, we were led to believe. We were also led to believe Marilyn Monroe self-destructed.
Right.
Okay. I'm telling you a rock star is worth more dead than alive, and the facts will prove me out. For example, John Lennon had no albums on the charts for 21 months before he died. When he was shot, I'm not even saying the boys put him away. He was shot. 5 John Lennon albums on the charts. 5 Beatles albums suddenly rose to the charts. I spoke to the attorney for Elvis's estate. Elvis's estate was worth $10 million when he died. It's worth $100 million today. When Elvis died, he sold more records in the 6 months subsequent to his death than he had sold in the prior 5 years. The #1 music video in the United States today is Jim Morrison and the Doors. Okay. I'm telling you that there's this necrophiliac mentality where we deify the rock stars. Now, that's one aspect. The other aspect is that the mob, organized crime, infiltrated the music business. And they made bootleg records and counterfeit records. And they began to invest a lot of money. And when they invest too much money, and they got a lot of records, and they're sitting in a warehouse, and there's millions and millions of albums, and they're not selling, the only surefire way to guarantee you're going to have a hit is to put out a hit on the guy that isn't selling. As soon as he goes down, the records sell.
So you scaring me now, because I'm afraid I'm going to get my limo, and the guy going to be in there saying, I want to talk to you about the question you asked on the show. Can we take a commercial and come right back? Because I got one more thing I need to ask him. We'll be right back. I find this stuff... Do we have any documentation about any individuals in the rock world, past or, well, in the past that maybe died in a way and we weren't told the truth? I mean, are there any facts?
There have never been investigative reporters who've done the kind of a job they did with Monroe. I don't know if it's because they're afraid. I don't know if it's because they're uncomfortable about it. I'm telling you that it was whispered. I mean, I would tell you that it started off as a joke because when Jimi Hendrix unfortunately died, okay, the records took off, and there was a meeting that took place at his record company, and the parent company was there, and you know, the boardroom, and there's the charts, and some guy said, but wait a minute, how come the arrow on our profits isn't going up next year the way it did last year? And someone said facetiously, well, you know, like, who do you want to knock off this year? Not meaning that they were responsible for it, and not that they...
But that was,
yeah, and it was like that
what
mentality.
What label was that Jimmy was with?
Warner's.
He was with Warner?
But you know, a lot of people who did not own Jimi Hendrix per se as a recording artist, but owned masters, tapes he had done, audition tapes he had done, demos he had done, okay, put out records later, okay, put his face on it, got old photographs of him, his estate, his father began suing them. They all made a lot of money. It became exploited. It's the nature of the industry. And we're all party to that, you understand, because we're buying that. Just like we go to Graceland, and last year for $45, you can buy a hound dog, a stuffed hound dog, and you shake its paw, and it played an old record of Elvis singing Hound Dog for $45. Well, I mean, if that's your thing, fine. But, I mean, we contribute to all of this. We make the artist worth more dead than alive.
Alive, how much can an artist make? No. I mean...
Can we talk? Okay.
Yeah.
There's different categories. The $20 to $25 million a year category now is Miss Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, Bruce Springsteen. Now, the more modest category of $12 to $15 million a year is Mr. Billy Joel, U2, Bon Jovi, okay? Acts like that. It's not difficult to make $5 or $6 million a year. Sell out 20,000 seats, $400,000 or $500,000 a night, go out on tour.
So when we talk that kind of money, we got to talk about groupies and girls. Let's get down to that.
You think that there are groupies and... Yes, there are groupies and girls. Now, Arsenio, I don't want to shock your virgin ears, but some of the things that went on the road in the wild heyday of rock and roll were quite outrageous. Now, there are groupies, and there is a subgroup of groupies who were the super groupies who followed the groups all over. Now, you know what the groupie is. The groupie is a girl who wants to touch a rock star, literally and figuratively, by having some sort of a sexual experience with him. And if she can't get the star, she gets the lead guitar player. If she can't get the lead guitar... I see the lead guitar players looking at them. If you can't get the lead guitar player, you get the bass player. If you can't get the bass player, you get the guy who sets up the speakers.
If you can't get the speaker guy, maybe you go to bed with the lawyer.
The lawyer, you got it, you got it.
Now, be totally honest. Okay. Did you ever get you some because you were a lawyer with a big group? Come on, let's talk about the dog in you.
Now, the super groupies, they would tell stories to each other, but to prove what they had done, to memorialize the sexual event, they would take plaster of Paris with them, and they would make a plaster cast of a certain anatomical part of a rock star to prove they had been with the rock star. then that cast would
Wait,
be...
what was the rock star doing during this?
Maybe he was in great pain, or maybe he was so stoned out of his gourd he didn't know what was happening. But, you see, then they would trade them.
So you wake up with plaster all over your thigh, and you say, what happened?
Well, they were proud. They were proud because it became a big thing. Well, maybe a big thing. Oh, okay. So the girls took them like baseball trading cards. So a bunch of girls would say, okay, I'll give you one Rolling Stone for 2 Mothers of Invention. Now, I'll give you the Temptations if you give me 2 of the 4 Tops. And they would collect them. And they became a major thing to prove
I got a Teddy Pendergrass for Luther Vandross.
I'm going to tell Luther.
You know what? I could talk to you forever, man. You're wonderful. It's a great book. I'm going to keep this copy, okay?
Okay.
Get it. Sweetie, baby, cookie, honey, thanks for being here. We'll be right back with comedian Bob Zaney.